Here's a technique that comes out of, shameless plug, my new book, the Illustrator CS Killer Tips book, and it talks about how to take something from Illustrator to Photoshop and make sure everything is on separate layers, then you can work with everything. So we're going to go ahead and export this. We don't just save it, we export. We're going to export it as, let's go to the desktop, 8-ball. But more importantly, we want to make sure the file format is PSD or Photoshop. Click Export and it'll bring up a second dialog box of choices. The top part is important if you were worried about resolution. In our example, we're not, but obviously typically you would be worried about whether it was high resolution or screen resolution, so on. But for our purposes, the key thing we want to talk about is the fact that right layers, I can read it, I just can't say it. Right layers is checked, as well as preserve text editability and maximum editability. So we click OK. And now let's switch back to Photoshop. And in Photoshop, we're going to go to our desktop and try and find that thing there it is. We click Open. And we'll look in our Layers palette. And you see that on the one hand, we got our text, so we can actually edit it, which is pretty cool. Notice how I put everything in a folder, because in Illustrator it was actually all on one layer. But the problem is, in this case, I can't really do much. This is a shape which I can't edit in any way. So while it worked to some extent, there's one other thing we want to consider doing. Actually, a couple in Illustrator. So we're going to switch back to Illustrator, and what we're going to do is find our Layers palette in Illustrator, and I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to take this object and push it onto that layer, just so it's on its own separate layer. But more importantly, there's one other thing, or I should say as importantly, there's one other thing I want to do with this object selected, and that's to go to Illustrator's Pathfinder dialog box and choose Make Compound Shape. Okay, so now we'll export once again, and we'll call this 8-ball 2 so we can distinguish it. PSD, export. Again, right layers and all that good stuff. Click OK. And we'll go back to Photoshop again. Open 8-ball 2. And the big difference in this case is, besides the fact that it's separated the layer, is this is now a compound actual shape layer. So I could actually go in here and actually edit the path as well. So that just takes it a step further from taking the Illustrator design into Photoshop. You can keep it and preserve the vector capabilities or vector qualities as long as you do that extra step of back in Illustrator. Let's go back here. Select the object, and then from the Pathfinder, make sure it says Make Compound Shape. So there you go, a quick way from the pages of the Illustrator Killer Tips book, now available on Amazon and from your neighborhood bookstore. Thank you very much. Phew, after a tutorial like that, there's nothing left to say.
Cross, thanks very much for watching.